learning it. There we go. Okie dokie. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for having us here. This afternoon, where are we at? Thursday? It's always Thursday. Why am I even asking?
Always Thursday. That's right.
Thursday, September 16th. And, we're going to have a really fun conversation about how the Amazon A9 algorithm works. Slightly different than the previous conversations that we had on specifically SEO, because I know we had the SEO panel. And then since then, I was also talking to the seller.tools guys a little bit about SEO. And I know that there's a strong overlap.
Yeah.
But SEO still specifically revolves mostly around tracking actions and then text and files like on a listing. Whereas I think we could talk a little bit about other stuff. So let's
do a little bit of housekeeping real quick on this. This is the MC part of things. So of course the topic, Amazon's A9 algorithm. We're talking about ranking. We'll probably throw in some things regarding ranking, regarding SEO, regarding e-commerce and social commerce in general, because there's a lot of different things that we're going to look at as far as traffic, what's going on in 2021, some of the traffic changes and setbacks we've had, and some of the seller panic. I'll throw that in there just to kind of let people know that you're not alone as far as panicking this year. Just don't be caught the fool, as my wife would say. As far as reacting to what you think is going on, instead of joining discussions like this, where you can find out exactly what is going on and what to do about it. For those of you who are with us today, thank you. I see that some of you are from around the world, and I see in one case, it looks like it's probably about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. So thank you for being here. That's some passion on the topic. So we'd love to see that. Just to make sure everybody's got here, go ahead and open up your chat for me and just put a 1 if you can hear us clearly. Give us a 0 if there's any kind of audio or visual problems. Right now, you should be seeing Anthony. You should be seeing myself. I'm Brian. And you should be hearing us just fine. And Anthony, if you want to share the first slide, we'll make sure that they can see it. Awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your participation. Actually makes a big difference in these as far as our energy and how we're willing to stick around to answer questions after the fact. So that's good to see you guys are engaged. I love that.
Okie dokie. So here we have the first slide, which goes over exactly what we're going to talk about today, a deep dive into Amazon's A9 algorithm. We hope to discover how the A9 algorithm works and why understanding it might be a game changer for you on Amazon. I like to geek out on this kind of stuff. I know that you like to geek out on this kind of stuff.
No.
But it's like, it's beyond just like the geekiness of understanding how it works. Like really, there's certain fundamental things that if you knew them, they might kind of change your approach on how you're doing things like optimization or what you decide to target when you do PPC or promotions, etc. So this is stuff.
That's a good point. You figure out, okay, so as far as like what the whole point of being here and listening in on this is so that you can essentially identify what are the levers that you can pull right now that are actually going to make a difference in your business. And I'm hoping that everybody who's on the call is actually interested in doing that and actually taking action, not simply just taking notes. All right. So this is going to be recorded. We are going to publish a replay over the weekend. So you don't need to be scrambling for notes. However, you may want to take screenshots periodically if you see something that is a gem that's important to you. We will do, this is the whole show here is sponsored by our advertising and marketing agency, Canopy Management. And we'll throw a slide up there just really quick. This is not about promoting Canopy. There you go. Nice. Awesome. But we have an established team. I think I think I was told that we're like 65 strong with another 30 or 40 contractors for some of the smaller one-off kind of stuff that we do. But we do everything in-house, which is kind of a difference with us. And we don't rely on software to do the work. We actually use software in order to accelerate what our human team does. Our track record, as you can see on the left-hand side there, pretty phenomenal by industry standards. These are our average. So these aren't minimums. These are our average. In other words, some cases we'll do less, and some cases we'll do a heck of a lot more. And our track record is added. Something we're not showing here is we've had several of our clients, we call them partners because we're in it together, go on to be acquired for millions of dollars in the acquisition path, which I know some of you may be interested in. Not our topic today, but just so you know, is that if you are looking for somebody to take over marketing and advertising on Amazon, I would absolutely have a conversation with our team to see if it's a good fit, to see whether or not we can help you in your brand situation. Yes, okay, so I think that's it as far as the pitch goes.
There we go. All right.
There we go. Now, why do we even care? Why do we even care about me? Okay, yeah, really quick here. So, all right, quick introductions. Who the heck are we? So, my name is Brian Johnson. My claim to fame is I've been doing this a long time. So is Anthony. We've each put in our 10,000 hours in the Amazon space. We are not here to pat ourselves on the back and say, hey, aren't we cool? We're here to provide value to you, to give things to you so that you can take action for your business. All right. We're not here to sell anything. We're not here to make ourselves, feel good and hear our own voice. We're here to talk about things that you can actually put in place today. But sometimes there's going to be a few of you who have never heard of us before, which is cool. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Just so you understand as far as where we're coming from, that's why we do these two slides to say, like, look, we've been in this game a while. We've got a lot of experience. I co-founded different companies, software training, the agency, of course, and my history on this is I have been fortunate, very privileged in this space to have been able to help over 20,000 brands increase their sales on Amazon by over $1 billion with a B. I'm extremely happy about that. That's not my that's not my version of me sitting on a Lamborghini. Please don't be that person. It's just more of a case of, look, I've been doing this a long time. I've pretty much have seen just about everything. It's really hard to surprise me anymore, and I know that goes for Anthony as well.
Yeah, I've done this for a little while too. I think what I bring to the table, though, is the fact that I have made it my business to study the algorithm and ranking and traffic signals and things like that, so that I just because I want to know it, but in knowing it, it's helps me a lot with making intelligent optimization decisions and promotion, putting together promotion campaigns. And anyway, so because I've been in the game and focused on that so much for a good amount of time, I mean, since 2014, I've learned a thing or two, and I really like to share. So that's kind of what we're here doing right now with this deep dive. So we'll start it off.
One last thing I was going to ask for the audience here. In order to help us, we're going to craft some of our message and some of our suggestions here based off of who you are. Okay, so this is the interactive part of this, right? So what I need to know from you, all right, there's a lot of you on this call right now, and I want to see the numbers come in, is tell me at this point, how many years? If you're less than a year, just put a 0. If you're just getting started, put a 0 in there. If you've been in this for 1 to 2 years, put a 1. If you're in this for 5+ years, put a 5. Just kind of give me a number of years that you've been selling on Amazon so that we understand who we're speaking to and what kind of range we need to address. Because we don't want to speak too much to the basics if you're all advanced, right? I'm seeing a lot of 3, 5s, and 6s.
Yeah, I was about to say, there's a lot of advanced people here. That's cool.
I'm really I mean, there's 15,000 new VAs that came on the market who are all experts that have been in this game for 2 months. So I'm glad to see that all of you have been in this a while.
Right on. Okay. Well,
Cool.
that informs like, I guess, the level that we can hit. For anybody that is new, though, I'm still going to use understandable English. So I think we'll all get the message, hopefully.
I won't.
Let us know if you need clarification. Anyway. All right. So the first step, Amazon's A9 algorithm definition. So basically, this isn't like the dictionary definition. This is the kind of comment on the fact that most sellers, they only see the surface, right? Uh, Most sellers are under the impression it's kind of basic, right? You get more sales, you rank higher, and there's a strong correlation there. But that would just barely be scratching the surface of what is essentially an iceberg. So we really want to kind of go deeper into that.
Okay. Now,
All
we would maybe also differentiate between AA, A9, and A10.
Oh gosh.
A9 is the actual. So AA and A9 actually exists. Okay. A10 does not exist, nor has it ever existed. So if you ever hear anybody who says, hey, this is based off of A10, run away very fast. That was a marketing hype that other people picked up on. And yeah, anyway, A9 is actually the name of the algorithm or the search company that Amazon either started or acquired. I forget now the exact specifics of it, but they called the algorithm the rules that the system uses, that the Amazon platform uses in order to determine when to show products, when to show ads. There's actually different algorithms for A9 versus advertising. So there is some overlap, but I want you to make sure that you understand is that the A9 is primarily for the organic results, and the ad auction uses its own algorithm. There is some overlap, but there are some unique differences as well. We're not going to be talking about the ad auction algorithm on this one. And then A8 is just actually Amazon's tracking link. So it's not actually an algorithm at all.
I feel like, just to clarify a little bit on what you just said, I feel like it's a little, I mean, like, it's not important, but technically speaking, I don't think A9 is actually an algorithm because they use a number of machine learning algorithms, in the random forest, which is kind of the model. There are lots of algorithms that are coming to conclusions simultaneously. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. We're talking about what affects essentially the shuffling of the rank order for organic placement on the Amazon catalog. So, starting with algorithm misunderstandings, high rankings does not come from lots of rebates, right? I mean, like, that can help, but that being the solution to the whole ranking problem is not realistic. Just like high rankings don't come primarily and only from bigger PPC spend. There's a whole lot more to it. These simple actions are aspects of marketing strategies, right? A lot of people do manage to stumble on to high ranking by either doing like just boatloads of rebates or by bidding like crazy on PPC or a combination of the two. It's just important to understand though that like that's not the end of the story. That's barely the beginning. So I know that I myself and many people in this space have kind of broken down all the things that tag relevance in a keyword with relation to a keyword product relationship. So this might be a little bit different than what most of you are used to, right? Because you're used to seeing like a list of like all these activities that kind of impact relevance, and those activities didn't go anywhere. I mean, that's not a thing. But what I'm showing you here is something that actually is really cool how I found this. So I was doing research, trying to dig up more research papers, specifically outlining the way the algorithm works. And I stumbled on this body of work. It's a whole bunch of YouTube videos, basically all about how to pass this test and then take this job. So there's a Tasker website. I think it's called Toloka or something like that. I believe it's owned by Yandex, so I believe that's Eastern European. Anyway, it's like micro workers, right? It's like Amazon Turks. You go on and you do like tasks for companies, and then you get paid, pennies for every click or for whatever. Right. Amazon, for a short period of time, about 4 or 5 months, was on this platform, and they had a specific job on the platform where they were having humans verify the the accuracy of their ranking, of their relevance engine, which is insane and cool. And anyway, all these videos were made because people were like, oh my gosh, Amazon, it's a big brand. We can work for them and we can make some money, especially in the Amazon space where it's primarily VAs, right? So all the videos were kind of targeted towards Filipino VAs and Indian VAs, even though it's an Eastern European company, because a lot of them understand Amazon. Like you just said, there's like 10,000 that are experts now. Well, because of this understanding, they were really excited. So a bunch of people took the opportunity to make a ton of content. So I looked into it and I was like, what's going on here? So I went to this Tasker site, I signed up for it, and then I went ahead and took this test. Basically, you have to pass the test in order to take any of these jobs for Amazon. And the test in itself is a training module that tells you, the micro worker, what you're looking out for, what to correct. In essence, what they were doing was training these overseas micro workers on this, in the simplest terms, what relevance is, what the relationship between products and keywords are with regard to relevance under 4 simple tags, right? And this was, I just thought that was really valuable because it kind of reshifted like the way I understand how keywords fit into all this. There are basically these 4. Exact, right? So the micro workers explain, like it was explained to them, right, that an exact match is a product that exactly matches the query, right? And there's not really a lot of room for error here. If the query is garlic press, then the product needs to be garlic press, right? But then there's another category called substitute. And this is when things that it would make sense for them to still be found for a query, but it's not the exact thing. So to give you an example, if the query is KitchenAid garlic press, but they can't just show you KitchenAid garlic presses, right? They only make like what, 3 or 4? So what's the rest of the page? The rest of the page is going to be other brand garlic presses, and specific to that query, these would be considered substitutes. Right. Obviously, the broader the term gets, though, the more interesting that becomes. So when you're thinking about your products, you have to think for specific keywords, is this an exact match, or would you show up as a substitute for more popular keywords? Very interesting to kind of get in that headspace. The next tag was complement. So there are some search queries that there's not enough results that are exact. So what can come up on the page are complementary products. Amazon, and we'll get into this more later, but Amazon does more than just use like relevance to exact queries to show people on page 1. People do make purchases of seemingly irrelevant products or seemingly irrelevant to the query. Amazon knows this. They're optimizing for human behavior, for customer behavior. So there is a place for complements too. And complements are not substitutes because it's not the same thing. A complement would be the rubber or silicone garlic crusher that goes along with the garlic press. Now, a lot of times those come in the same package, but in case it was separate, it might show up on the page too. And it's important to kind of understand like where your products might fit for keywords on that level. And then obviously irrelevant is irrelevant. Irrelevant means that there's no place for it to exist, and that is more than likely going to be pushed off the page. Now, substitutes and complements usually get pushed farther down because for the most part, Amazon appears to really like to try to rank in order of relevance, but it's just really cool to kind of understand that these are real, like, annotations that they're tagging, right, keyword product pairs with. So
I was going to add in here. So it's like, I know that we've done, because I participate in a number of masterminds that occur around the world over the past few years. Sometimes a piece of information will be magically found. A piece of inside information from Amazon will be magically revealed, starting with, some of the mastermind groups, right? And I remember a couple of years back is we actually had the high level breakdown of how the A9 calculates, does its calculations, what the weighting was. And back then they changed it constantly. And so it's not like what was there 2 years ago is what is today, right? But it's interesting is what they'll do is they'll have different categories that the algorithm will break down, and it includes things like relevance. It includes things as far as past shopping behavior. It'll include seller performance. It'll include where the traffic came from. What if it came from a different site? Did it come from a different part of the world? Is the shopper is the product in FBA? Is the product in an FBA warehouse near the customer? There's a lot of different things that go into calculating what products are shown to a shopper, right? And in that particular moment. And so one of the things that we say on a regular basis, because in part because one of the largest multipliers of ranking on Amazon, even back then, was the same thing as we see now, and that is the relevance. Okay. And so what Anthony is talking about here is there's different forms of relevance. Typically, when we say, like, if I'm talking about advertising, for instance, as far as PPC advertising, launching new ads, I'll say, focus in on, go out and do your keyword research using a keyword tool, but then filter that list yourself based off of what is exactly or directly relevant to your product. In other words, that search term is only bringing back products that are a lot like yours, right? Then move on to thinking, that's basically what you start out with as far as your advertising, because that's going to give you the highest amount of relevance. It's going to keep a very tight signal to Amazon to ensure that in case they make a mistake of reading what product that you have, which they're really good about, but just in case, when you launch, make sure that you have a very exact, very directly relevant set of keywords, not only in your product listing for SEO, but also in your advertising, in order to make sure you're verifying that Amazon's read of your product is exactly what you expect it to be. That way, you're not going to run into problems. That's primarily just to avoid problems, instead of doing a shotgun and saying, well, I'm going to run ads and have content that applies to my audience, and they're buying all 100 different kind of products. Don't do that yet. Not when you first launch. You can evolve that, and I highly recommend that you do. But basically go through these stages of going from exact when you first start out, evolve into substitute, evolve into complement, and then throw away your product when you evolve into irrelevant.
Yeah.
Kidding, of course, on number 4. But my point on that is number 4 is what we're always trying to avoid. And my experience, I don't know, Anthony, maybe you've seen the same thing, but my experience is that most brand owners, most product sellers, they know too much industry terminology. They've been sourcing it for so long that they've literally gotten to the point where they know so much that they don't even know when they're putting in terminology or images, or things that are actually quite irrelevant to what the shopper's intent is. And so staying focused on the exact and the substitute first and foremost. Substitute and complement are great for things like product targeting ads, as an example. So I just kind of want to put some context of, like, how would you apply what Anthony's saying? I completely agree with you on this, is that relevance by far has the largest multiplier in the algorithm. Obviously, there's a lot of things as far as based off of sales velocity, but it all starts, the pass fail, as I talk about when I'm talking about the ad auction, is if Amazon determines that you're not relevant, they just cut you out of the mix. You don't get to the starting line for the race. Same thing goes with A9. Is it if you have very low relevance compared to what Amazon thinks the shopper's intent is about, then you don't even show up. It's not that you show up poorly, you just don't show up. You're not even indexed. You're not even showing up in the search results.
So that was thank you very much for sharing the kind of like the strategy behind understanding this and then moving into the PPC. On the organic side, I just also wanted to mention that it's really important to know that this exists so that you can take a critical look at the keywords that you think are important to rank for, right? Because not every product has like a huge keyword that's just going to bring all the traffic in, right? You're selling a product and the most relevant keyword might only have like 5,000 searches a month, but there's a more general keyword. Well, now first of all, maybe your product is only considered a substitute or a complement for that keyword. That's important to know. So then you can kind of have an idea of how high up the rankings you might be able to even climb, or if there's a way for you to turn your listing into a more exact match for that. So it's really good to know these things. But moving on to the next one. So the significance.
Sorry, the 4 levels of algorithm relevance. Give me a 0 if you lost that concept, or give me a 1 if you got your head wrapped around that one and it makes sense.
I really liked it because it was just such plain.
Good.
It was such plain English. The way
that one was important enough for us to kind of beat to death if we have to, because it definitely has a very high. I like the fact that we're continuing on here with relevance factors. So
okay, so the significance of relevance factors, it's important to understand first off that sales is never the only reason for top ranking. Relevance, the reason why we're harping on relevance is because relevance, it is a huge, as you say, multiplier for ranking, but it's such a huge portion that you have to look at all of kind of the things that feed into it. And one of the misconceptions that people have often is that it's all about the sales. But we'll give you here's a fun little experiment you could try right now. For example, high price luxury items. If you go to Amazon right now and you search for diamond necklace, you will find that the first 30 or 40 listings are all $300, $400, $500, $700 necklaces. But if you run Helium 10 or Jungle Scout or whatever on that page, you'll find the number one seller in both units and revenue is the $11 cubic zirconium necklace. Now, based on the previous chart we just saw, that is obviously a substitute, right?
Not exact.
It's not an exact, it's a substitute. And it's ranked all the way on the bottom of the page, right? So you could see here, though, it's not sales. That sales isn't always the indicator. There's just
we should differentiate
things.
Sales volume versus units sold. Units sold has always been kind of the cornerstone that we assume that the A9 ranks on. It's certainly by far it's not the only factor, and Amazon continues to evolve it because they want a better experience for the shopper as well. So it's not simply just where the cheapest product that sells 1,000 units a minute is the one that ranks on top, because Amazon wants better quality than just having a junk sale on page 1.
Mm-hmm. Well, they really are. The point, I think the most important point to make is because a lot of people get hung up on things like price being a factor and sales being a factor, but ultimately Amazon, if the customer is already there, Amazon knows they've got you as a buyer. So to them, it's less important to worry about those being factors for relevance, because really is price or even is sales as relevant for a keyword as intention. And it's not just buying intention. Here, some people might just be using the keyword search to do research. If you look up Lord of the Rings, for example, right, as the keyword, people might just be looking to see what kind of merchandise are made. It's not going to just be and there's a lot of things that are relevant for Lord of the Rings, the movie, books, merchandise. So the moral of that story is you got to ask yourself, how important is this particular piece of data? Because there's tons of people out there always giving everybody advice on how can you determine relevance, or what is the strongest factor? Ask yourself this particular little piece, how important is this really for Amazon to know that this product pairs with this keyword perfectly? That's the common sense way of cross-referencing some of the information you're going to get out there.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
So relevance and factor.
I want to do some foreshadowing a little bit here. So somebody was asking me, it's for the link to Canopy. So I went ahead and put that in the chat for you there. So you should be able to see that there. But I did kind of want to, we're going to be talking about as far as obviously this slide, we're going to be talking about how as far as specific ranking and specific keywords. We're going to be jumping into talking about things as far as like some of the product to keyword relationship, how to interpret some of this data. So make sure you stick with us because we're getting into some more of the detail, the minutia, if you will.
Real quick, somebody did ask a question I wanted to address just really fast because I don't have a super long answer for it. They asked if geo ranking is there's such a thing as geo ranking. So there's a very strong correlation between, all right, sorry, let me back up. Amazon's #1 goal is to show the most relevant products, not necessarily, as we just talked about, the products most likely to be purchased, but the most relevant to the search, because searches aren't always for the purpose of buying a product in that moment. They do operate, and more so every year, more like Google in that way. Amazon is trying to produce the most relevant. Here's the thing though, Amazon is a shopping marketplace. What that means is that there will be a strong correlation between intention to buy and relevance, because that's what 95 or more % of people on Amazon are there for. So as such, with regard to the rank availability for a page, the availability of the product. So once Amazon figures out what this is the basic product type that this query is relevant for, then the next step is we want to put the products, because it is a product marketplace. That's what Amazon's going to be showing you is product listings when you do a search. So they need to then put the most available products that match that, that list of relevant product types. They have to, because they got to show you something, and they absolutely want you to be able to purchase if that's what you're looking to do. And if not, just show you what's available, and what's available is determined by the inventory. Like that's literally Amazon's claim to fame. Their first algorithm ever was a forecasting algorithm to better show people what was available to them. So they have this challenge of showing a list in order of availability of products from a catalog of millions of products. And their #1 priority is their Prime members, people they can get those products to in 2 days. So that means that when they're showing you this list, it's going to be ranked based on relevance, but a big portion of that is also going to be relevant from the pool of availability. So that was a long-winded answer to say geo ranking absolutely is a thing. Okay.
Yeah, and there used to be tools. I believe those actually have shut down now because that is an extremely cost intensive and equipment an intensive process of trying to check things like keyword rankings based off of geography, based off of location. It is absolutely relevant. Most brands are not at the scale where they really need to worry about it. It's kind of like day parting. It's like it's pretty unlikely that you're actually going to see any benefit if you're just moving 10 units a day. The exception on that, I would say, is like A/B split testing. I still would do that even at 10 units a day because that's still going to give you a lot of information. But yes, I do completely agree with that.
All right. So if we look at how relevance impacts your listing, as I was saying, first you have to understand that ranking is based on part of what's ranking is based on is specific keywords, right? We're literally talking about the relationship between a product and a query. So that query is going to be specific keywords. So we have to understand that we're not talking about BSR, which is like the ranking based on how often the product sells in regard to the whole category. We're talking about keyword ranking, which is only going to be a specific query and its relationship to specific products. So what relevance impacts when we're talking about it being based on specific queries is, and Brian can speak a lot more to this is actually going to impact your PPC impressions and costs, because the engine, now we're talking about, we already mentioned that there are separate algorithms for this, but even still, they're rooted in a lot of the same data. And the engine that runs the ads platform is is also drawing information, trying to figure out what is the most relevant ad to show you for a query, and
Right.
your relevance will impact these things. But I'll let Brian speak more to that.
Yeah, relevance is something that I harp on quite a bit. You know, it's the drum that I constantly say. There's a couple different ways of looking at relevance. First and foremost is, especially if you're, here's an example. You launch a brand new manual keyword campaign, let's say, and you're focused in on trying to actually get visibilities, get ad impressions, get visibility to your product. Amazon maybe is not understanding the relevance. In other words, maybe you haven't created, maybe you haven't put in your product description yet. Maybe you haven't completed your bullet points yet. Because it's a brand new listing, right? And you didn't give enough information. Maybe there's just not enough information maybe in that particular case where Amazon doesn't quite understand what product that you're selling in. Maybe you're trying a different subcategory. Maybe you had a low quality main image. There's a number of things that can interrupt Amazon's algorithm from already understanding, like, okay, I understand what product you're selling. I understand what audience buys this product. I can put you in front of them. However, the ad auction is going to look more heavily at the content of your listing, including the description field. And they're going to look at certain specific words that you may be trying to target with your advertising. And if they don't see a direct correlation between what a shopper is searching for and what you're saying that you're advertising for, then, like I mentioned before, the ad auction cuts you out. In other words, they're going to narrow down. Let's say you've got 1,000 sellers who are trying to advertise a product, but only 500 qualify because they have budget, they've got the buy box, and then they narrow it down even further because of relevance, which is one of the very first filters before all the rest of the advertising triggers occur. Relevance is they're going to narrow that down and say, who are the top 100, it's an arbitrary number, top 100 products that are most relevant to what this particular shopper is searching for in this moment and from their particular location. And so if there's any kind of deviation between what Amazon is expecting to be directly relevant to that particular search term that the shopper is using and their shopping behavior and your listing, then they simply just, like I said, they don't just rank you lower in the results, they cut you out, right? Now, here's why this matters. Here's how you carry this forward. There is this common myth or common belief that if I simply just bid higher, then my ad will show. And the problem with that is that if you are not qualified to even run the race, if you think, I always like to use the race car analogy. If you don't even make it to that final 50 that make it to the starting line in the first place, you're not racing. So it doesn't matter how hard you put on the gas, you're not going anywhere because you're not even on the racetrack, right? So that's kind of a loose analogy that I use there. But what I see is a lot of people who go in and say, well, I can just outdo this in part because seller support will, in the genius that they are, will say it's like, well, you just need to increase. They'll give you bad advice. They'll say you need to increase your bid. You're running more than one campaign, which is not allowed. A whole lot of crap, right? But ultimately, what you can do is you can make sure that your product listing SEO is relevant, keeping it focused on primarily the exact, most directly relevant terms that are in your product listing, throughout your product listing. Title, images, what you say in your videos, Amazon listens to that as well. What is in your bullet points, what's in your backend search terms, what's in your description. If you've got A+ content, what is in your alt text keyword fields. There's multiple places where Amazon is paying attention, and you want to make sure that you've got your phrases or single words or a combination thereof that is directly relevant to your product. If you in doubt, if you're not quite sure if this particular keyword phrase is directly relevant to your product, search it on Amazon. What comes back? Does your product come back? Does products you're exactly competing with come back? Most of your competition will not take the time to take their top 20 target terms, search on Amazon to say, and say like, am I even in the right playing field? Or is there a whole other kind of product out there that uses the exact same terminology that I wasn't aware of? Or secondarily, is the price point that I'm selling mine the search terms I'm going after, maybe they're in a completely different price point than what I'm trying to hit with the keywords that I'm going after. And so not simply just using a keyword tool in order to get a list of keywords, but actually vetting that information on your own with your own eyeballs for relevance to your product is going to give you a much better advantage than 95% of your competition who never take that step and simply just say, oh, well, the tool told me this, and so I'm just going to use it. And they go off blindly and they wonder why things aren't working. If that's you, days when you change. Manually vet your content for relevance.
So just to kind of tie this into what we've already talked about, correct me if I'm wrong, or actually I'm just going to ask you though, am I correct in this assumption? This would mean, because relevance also impacts costs, this would mean that in most situations, obviously there's going to be outliers, but in most situations, when you're targeting a keyword that your product is complementary for, you're going to pay more per click than somebody that's an exact match.
I would say, yes, that is true. Based off of click-through rate, because you're going to have a lower click-through rate typically because it's an add-on or a related product. It's not directly what somebody's searching for instance. And that could be, somebody searches using a brand name. They see your product as a substitute that is not branded, that doesn't have the same brand name. It's going to have a lower click-through rate because you're going to have a certain portion of people say, I only want this brand name. Therefore, I'm not going to click on anything else.
There you go.
And so things like click-through rates will affect things like ranking and cost per click. That is true.
There you go. Okay. Real quick, we got another question here. How long do you need to train A9 for relevance, or is it an ongoing process? So I'll let you speak to that with regard to like whatever you have control over in PPC. But on the organic side, cold start period is 7 days. 7 days that no matter what, all of your relevance is given the benefit of the doubt, like almost, limitlessly. Because the algorithm literally has no idea what your product is all about. After 7 days, there's going to start being some attachments to keyword phrases. And then after about 14 days, it's pretty solid. But I'm not sure how it works on the ad side.
Well, I'm going to give you a different opinion on that also, Anthony. So my belief, and this is me making shit up. No, my belief, based off of my observation, my experience, is that the AI, the artificial intelligence, the machine learning that the algorithm uses on Amazon has gotten smart enough, like many other platforms, where it can look at an image and determine, okay, this is what the image is. It can listen to a video and hear the words that you're speaking in the video and know what you're talking about. It can certainly look at all the text that you have, all the images that you've attached, and all the text that you've attached to your title, your bullets, your description, your back end, and make interpretation as far as what that is. Technically, the algorithm probably already knows, and the category that you assigned it to, assuming that's relevant. The algorithm probably already knows what you're selling and who the target audience is.
Yeah.
Where it makes a difference in that first 7 days is, did you screw it up? Are you misleading the algorithm by not including information because it may have, there's kind of confirmation bias here, is that the algorithm says like, well, I know what product you're in, I know what it's in, let me go ahead and confirm that with your content. And if you did not actually create your content listing, if you didn't fill things out, if you went off on a tangent and used a whole bunch of storytelling that really didn't talk about some of the key terms that people are searching for in that first 7 days, it's going to have its doubts. You don't want an algorithm on Amazon to have any doubts about what you're selling and who you're selling it to.
Let me add a caveat to what I said. When I talk about cold start 7 days, that's the literature specifically referring to a new product in a category. Basically, if you have a product that a lot of similar products already exist in that subcategory, it probably won't take 7 days. Amazon, like Brian said, the algorithm will know what you're selling, and it's just looking for confirmations. So it is like a more powerful situation if you screw up. If you do it right, though, you should be humming along within a couple of days. But in instances where you're selling in the new category, or you have a totally new product, maybe a different combination of primary keywords, then yeah, the algorithm is smart enough to only need 7 days to like really figure out where you're going to fit.
Right.
But that caveat needed to be added. I have one more question that came in that I would love for you to answer.
Well,
Can you?
let me do one other statement on that too, is that,
Okay.
that you first 7 days, right? Similar to the 1 to 2 week arbitrary number that people often hear as honeymoon period. That's kind of
Well, yeah,
more,
they're connected. That's the reason why the honeymoon period works, is because there's a period of time when the algorithm's giving you the benefit of the doubt for relevance.
on the organic side, we typically say 2 weeks. On the PPC side, we say 2 to 4 weeks. It's more of a case of like overdo it just in case Amazon
Yeah.
didn't get it the first few days, right?
For sure.
But part of the reason on that is that we want to make sure that Amazon understands exactly what we have, and then at the end of that honeymoon period or initial kind of launch PPC period, then we're going back and we are now reassessing. We know what product we're selling. We think it's exactly like these other products that are ranking for all these terms that we think are selling well in these terms that I'm competing directly against. But ultimately, the algorithm is going to come back and make certain decisions about where your product is a better fit compared to some of these direct substitutes for your product. That's when you go back and you start looking at the data. What keywords am I actually ranking for? What search terms are my ads actually converting for? Is the signals back to you in the first 2 to 4 weeks that you then kind of adjust your course and say, well, I thought I was most relevant for these, these huge search volume keywords, but it turns out Amazon wants to kind of corner me into this something more specific, and you can either go with it or you can fight it.
Well, the reason why
you make at that point,
the reason why that happens is because they're basing it off of buyer behavior. The number one biggest lever for determination of relevance is buyer behavior. So that is going to determine the whole course. You could go into it thinking one thing. If it goes in a different direction, that wasn't just Amazon arbitrarily making that decision. That's because buyers either weren't or were clicking your product for certain keywords. And buyer behavior is absolutely the strongest indicator. When the buyers tell Amazon, this is the product that I think that is best for me for this keyword, that's like the strongest signal you could possibly get, and Amazon's going to act accordingly. So that's what happens.
Who wants me to give them a wake up call by giving one more point that I'll make on that as far as how Amazon looks at keywords. If you've ever had your product move from one subcategory to another subcategory, put a 5 in the chat.
Oh goodness. How many people have suffered this ill fate of having your, because what happens, and they don't tell you. Amazon doesn't tell you, they just move it. And the next thing you know, you're like, why are my rankings all wonky? And I bet you that there's a lot of people in our audience that it has happened to, and they never even knew it.
Right. So based off of the masterminds I've been in, the people that the conversations that I've had internal with Amazon, like you have, our own R&D team, all these things, all these collaborations that we have where we get to collect cool geek out information, right? What I have observed, and I've actually built tools in order to research this as well, and I've seen it again and again. Each Amazon will take a subcategory, what you also may know as a browse node, right? It's basically an assigned number for the specific subcategory that your product is most relevant to, that is assigned to, right? And Amazon over the years has gotten tighter and tighter as far as making sure that you're in the category that you say you're in, right? So you're not trying to game the system for bestseller badge, right? However, Amazon also does this thing with each browse node, with each subcategory, and they say, okay, here's the top 100,000, let's say, most relevant by sales, by conversion rate, whatever, search terms for each browse node, for each subcategory. So what that means is that if you take your top search term and you search on Amazon right now, you're going to see on the left-hand side that there's going to be probably a handful of subcategories that show up on the left-hand side. It's not showing every category that's on Amazon. It's only showing the ones that are obviously most relevant to yours. Those are actually in order of what Amazon considers to be the most relevant subcategories for that particular term. The top one is the most relevant for that term. The second one is the second most relevant, so on and so forth. If your product is assigned to a subcategory that is not on that, that top visible list of subcategories for the search results for that specific search term, because it changes for every search term, then what happens is Amazon may not be sending you enough traffic, either ads or organic. You just don't have the visibility. You're off relevance according to the algorithm.
Mhm.
Now, if your product is converting on a search term that is more relevant for a different subcategory than your product is assigned, and I've certainly seen this when we've done, like, say, a huge giveaway promotion to drive a specific keyword that we thought was high traffic and it turned out to be a different subcategory. Amazon will say, you know what? Your product seems to be converting on terminology that's more relevant for a different subcategory. We're going to do you a favor. We're going to move you over to that more relevant subcategory so you can get more traffic. Problem with that, of course, is that if you've been converting heavily on a search term that you artificially promoted and you get moved, you may lose out on all the other 50 keywords that were naturally converting for your product. And so that is the same reason why you can be assigned to, in the last, 3 years, I suppose, you could have a product that has assignments to 2, 3, even 4 subcategories. And you could have ranks in those because Amazon will say, these are the 4 subcategories. Hear me on this. In your product listing, if you look at your bestseller ranking, you've got multiple subcategories. It's because your product is converting on search terms that are highly relevant to those subcategories. So if there's a disconnect, if you look at those subcategories, it's like, I got no idea why I'm also assigned to this other subcategory. You need to figure that out. Because Amazon is saying that you're converting on terms that are directly relevant to a subcategory that you don't think is relevant. Amazon's got a lot more data than you have. You need to figure that out. So this is something where I usually lose a lot of people. They'll usually beg a lot of questions. I'll stick around and answer some questions on that afterwards. But let's kind of jump back into the topic on here so we can finish up our last couple of slides because we've got a couple of cool things coming up here.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for diving into that. We'll revisit. All right. So understanding the product to keyword relationship. We've obviously been talking about this a lot, but I'll kind of get into some geeky stuff. This is all based on, the scientific papers that have been written on how this algorithm works. First off, take advantage of uncommon queries. That is the scientific term for long tail keywords.
Right.
Literally the shorter tail keywords, so I don't know anybody that's familiar with Danny McMillan. He came out with some information about from a scientific paper, and it goes into detail about like how categories are even chosen for the main search page, because like the home page search bar is the most popular bar, search bar that's used on the site, and so they have to have this whole other algorithm that factors in something called a hunger score to decide what category is even the most relevant for the term. Right. Before they can even go into the products within that category. Well, there's a whole lot of competition for short tail keywords with regard to hunger scores. I think the easier thing to do is to avoid that fight altogether. So you should take advantage of uncommon queries, meaning basically the algorithm focuses more deeply on ranking within a category if the keyword is longer. And that kind of takes you out of like this fight that you don't really have much control over, because you can't control whether or not Amazon has decided for a specific keyword that a totally different category is more popular in that moment than the category that your product is in. That's ridiculous. You can't even try. So I say don't. So basically what that means is you want to take your short tail keywords and have them be seed words inside of your longer tail, but really, especially in the beginning, when you're running promos and when you're doing PPC, you really do want to create a strong foundation with uncommon queries, which will be longer tail, much more specific keywords. Keywords that are exact, substitute, and complement. We already talked about that. Like, be aware of where your product probably fits in that little, relevance map for those three things. And then here's an interesting, just like an interesting tidbit fact that a lot of people probably don't know. Being ranked doesn't keep you ranked. And what I mean by that is a lot of people seem to think that your actual rank is a factor in relevance, but it's not. Turns out, according to the science literature, that the algorithm actually accounts for positional bias. So like they know if you're number 3, you're probably getting, an extra 40% of the clicks. And they're not going to factor that in deciding whether or not that number 3 product is actually deserves to be there, which I find fascinating because I promise you back in 2015, that's not how it worked, but it works that way now. So really, really cool stuff. You have anything to add?
No, I think you said that well, and I tend to be long-winded, so I don't want to take up too much more time on that one.
Okay. All right. So
other questions too. I don't know if we want to wait until the end on those, but
yeah. Well, I think we're almost done, so we can definitely hit those. But how to interpret all the data. So basically, it feels like beating a dead horse when we say all of this stuff, but the top product wins, right? Now, obviously, there's going to be outliers. There's always going to be somebody that figured out how to game the system, but ultimately, the product that deserves to be there, that should rank well, usually will rank well. So how do you make sure that you're that product? And I know Brian has a lot to say about this. Differentiation. The key is differentiate. Literally, you have to stand out. And that's not just your main image has something different in it. That's like everything from the quality of your packaging to, if you're bundling other products, to if you offer a better, customer experience. Like all in all, however you can differentiate. This is the easier route. Otherwise, you're going to have to like hire a hacker to like do some crazy stuff that probably won't work for another 2 months.
Yeah, and I think this is more focused. This is kind of this message is more directed to those who created a listing once, 5 years ago based off of a template and haven't changed it since, or did just the minimum just to get the product listing up. That's what a lot of your competitors did. So if you do just slightly more than your competitors, that is enough to bump you up as far as relevance, to increase conversion rate. Increase conversion rate is going to, both relevance and increased conversion rate is definitely going to have an impact on your keyword ranking.
Definitely. All right. No, and that was like the lessons, but now we have questions, and I hope we have more questions.
Yeah, I figured we were going to have a lot more Q&A because there's so much more we could unpack on this, but for the sake of trying to fit this all into an hour, we didn't want to get too deep. So a lot of it was focused on what's the primary thing that we think you should be focused on. If you didn't catch it already, it would be relevance. Is probably one of the biggest factors. Now, are there a lot of other things that go into the ranking algorithm? Absolutely, and we can kind of field those. I know we've got a couple of questions on here, so if you want to start putting your questions either into the Q&A or into the chat, then we'll go ahead and start fielding those because we still have a lot. I'm sure we've got a lot of questions on this.
I want to give you the first question though, because I think you'll really like it. Can you recommend good step-by-step PPC training for newbies?
Let me think here. Yes. So here's what I'll say. So in chat, let me go ahead and put this into chat here. And I saw the question earlier, so I already created this format. So if you're not already part of my Amazon PPC troubleshooting group on Facebook, I definitely recommend that you click on this link, which automatically searches for the group, and then you can join in there. I'll let you in. In the announcement section, if you're in there or you're about to be in that group, in the announcement section is a list of both free and paid resources for you to consider, including some of my, quick start checklists, some of my larger guides. I've got, a link over to my whole YouTube channel, which has training videos on it. Obviously, I've got the Sponsored Products Academy 3 professional training course, right? That's a 6-week, in-depth, course for somebody who really wants to master the subject. And then, of course, obviously, what we were saying, of course, what obviously this particular slide here suggests also is to go out if you are a brand that is, you feel like you're at the point where you're spread too thin and you've got other things to focus on, and you definitely need somebody to focus on your advertising and your marketing and to be on top of everything that changes constantly on Amazon, then at least have a conversation. It's a free conversation. We're not charging for it. Have that conversation with our team over at canopymanagement.com and just see, is it a good fit, or maybe not now, maybe later.
All right. So a number of resources, a group, a course, and then, management, definitely. All right.
Yep.
So I want to jump into this question here. So suppose I am going to list a bracelet and I choose keyword that other sellers are using. So will it work, or what is best for me to just wait for some time? Every product that exists on the Amazon catalog has keywords. If you're selling a product that already exists on the catalog, then you are going to be relevant for some of the same keywords as them. So the last slide was the advice was to differentiate. Essentially, what happens is, unless you bring to the table a product that has never or doesn't have like a lot of other sellers, right? Maybe it's a new product, right? A couple of years ago, for example, there was a period of time when those VR headsets that held your phone, there wasn't even a subcategory for it. There was only like 5 or 10 sellers. If you're in one of those situations, then you're in a prime position to actually create the relevance for keywords in a new subcategory. If you're not, though, if you're selling a product that a lot of other sellers have, you guys are going to be competing for visibility over the same keywords. You can't avoid that. So what you have to do then is outmarket them. This starts with having a better listing. You have to have a listing that speaks to people's emotional response to your product. Better media, that's images, that's video. Like, how can you better demonstration, by the way, one of the most effective forms of using video in advertising, hands down, bar none. If you can show your product in use next to another product, and you can visually demonstrate that your product can outperform another one, it doesn't, like, you don't have to show your competitor's name brand. Just like, here's
don't bash your competitor.
Yeah, just show like, here's a product, and then here's your product, and see like the bounty commercial, see how much better mine picks up than the generic competitor. Do stuff like that, and that's when you win. You set yourself apart and you win the sale. And when you're winning not just the sale, but the add to cart, you're winning the traffic, you're winning the clicks, you're winning the micro conversions. When you're winning those things is when you start to outrank your direct competitors for the same keywords. I hope that answered your question. What about advanced PPC training?
We already answered that one.
Yeah.
Part of that same free and paid resources that was listed in the group.
Here's an interesting one. Is any one keyword ranking impact another, since all keywords impact total sales? So
yes,
this has layers, man. This has layers. That is such an interesting.
The answer is yes.
it indirectly does, and the reason why is because keyword position for one keyword can impact overall visibility, and like you said, overall sales, and also overall page interactions, which could have a positive or negative impact on related keywords. For the most part, though, I think the intention of Amazon's algorithm is to try and to isolate the relationship between the product and the keyword as much as possible for every keyword. Just, as a matter of it being easier and less messy. But it's a huge catalog, and there's a lot of overlapping keywords. So I think it's pretty much impossible for them to not have some level of overlap and therefore impact on each other. Though I think it might be minor, unless you're talking about like a long tail keyword impacting a seed keyword. That's going to be because of the way it's indexed and the way the algorithm like reads it on like a zeros and ones level, if that makes sense. So that's my answer.
Yeah. By the way, kind of a sidebar here. So we are obviously answering the questions live right now. If you happen to be catching this whole the video as a replay over on my YouTube channel or through the post, make sure that you're also adding into the comments what your questions are, because we do listen to those even 2 weeks after we do this webinar. We're actually listening for those questions as well and continue to answer those throughout. So if you got a question that comes up later on, or if you're catching this as a replay, make sure you add in your comments. We'll be glad to get you an answer.
Absolutely. Here's a question about Canopy. Do you help brands which are launching?
Yes and no. So we do, yeah, we because of the track record that Canopy has as far as helping clients, helping partners, we can kind of pick and choose who we get to work with, right? And so generally we do have certain minimums as far as amount of sales that a brand has selling on Amazon. However, if you're in a situation where you've already built up a track record with another product, another brand, something off Amazon, Shopify, WooCommerce, whatever the case is, then that will also substitute as far as being an established product. There's a lot of resources that we can probably point you at if you are just getting started. There's plenty of, some of our peers have some great, courses and training as well. We can certainly point you in that direction. If you give us some more information, just contact us after today's workshop. But generally, because like I said, because of the track record that Canopy has, we're looking for those who are probably established, probably not a startup, but certainly maybe after their first year, and they're established enough and they're moving forward.
All right, so we got another question here. You mentioned people gaming the system by categorizing on a less relevant browse node. We're seeing some competitors do this to win bestseller flags. How is Amazon working against this? Man, I thought that they cleaned that up a long time ago. Are we seeing a resurgence of this?
Well, no, I mean, I think it's more of a case of what I was talking about before is it's if the subcategory that they're in still has some high relevance for the search terms that they're actually converting on, then they're going to show up as a bestseller. Most likely, they're not going to stay there long. In other words, either Amazon's going to move them to a more relevant subcategory, which we definitely see on a regular basis, or they can't sustain it because they're trying to game the system. They're trying to force sales by creating maybe like social commerce or off Amazon promotions in order to show a lot more sales on a specific keyword, for instance. Then they can get a bestseller and they can rank high in that specific subcategory. But it's either an expensive or a short-term play. So Amazon's system is already designed to handle this. One of the things that you will absolutely learn living in the world of Amazon is somebody always gets away with something, right?
Yeah.
And usually it's a direct competitor of yours, right? And so what that means is that there's a whole industry of black hat that is designed to, we could talk for a long time as far as just black hat goes. In other words, it's never going to be a perfectly fair system, right? It's not even going to be close to a perfectly fair system. You're going to have to work on the problem and figure out, how do I now, even when I've got a competitor or two that seems to be gaming the system or doing something against terms of service, do you report them? No, mainly because it's a waste of your time and you're waste of your mental energy. But also, Amazon has they like to scrutinize your listings and your brand as a result of reporting things. And so if it's one of those things where it's like, if your crap doesn't stink, then maybe you can get away with it. Otherwise, be careful on what you ask for, because they'll turn the eyes on you as well. So I would work more on what we've talked about, is making sure that you're refining and reviewing your relevancy, making sure that you're using some of the best practices when it comes to advertising. Certainly trying to differentiate. You'll hear me talk about that in multiple videos on YouTube and other workshops, as far as trying to differentiate and really stand out and really talk your messaging of your benefits of your product to your target audience, so that you stand out from the competition without playing the ranking, gaming the ranking system. And I would say that 2022 is the year that you're also going to be looking at how do I also connect directly with my target audience on other off Amazon social media sites. It's going to be huge in 2022.
Word. All right. Here's a really good question. When running title experiments, is your ranking affected? Yes. So, I don't know if you want to contribute to this at all, but I will say that it can for sure. The ideal scenario is that it won't happen. Amazon claims that they have the latent semantic system. Basically, it's supposed to be there to be able to tell you already said this product is this. The main keywords are still there. So we believe that this is still the same. But that doesn't mean that it's not like, especially in the cold start period. That doesn't mean that that won't happen. It could very well be that they take your exact phrase match that's in your title, and then when you change it, they turn around and they go, "Whoa, okay, we're going to take this one now, but that one became less relevant," and that is going to impact your ranking. So
yeah, and Ed, I've had the fortune of being able to have conversations with Ed, and he asked some great questions both in the group and in person. And so that is a fantastic question. Let's put it kind of frame it a little bit different so that people understand the impact of this. Amazon experiments are what they call A/B testing. For those of you who are brand registered, you absolutely should be doing that every single month. Like you should be running Amazon A/B experiments right now on your title or your main image or both, right? Right now and throughout the year. Don't stop, because I believe in it that much. It's about incremental improvement. Now, A/B split testing, when it's done natively on Amazon and they do it correctly, that is every other shopper gets the different, gets A, gets B, gets A, as far as two different titles. How it may affect your sessions, your traffic, and your conversions can either positive or negative, can be how much of a difference are you trying to introduce in that split testing. The general rule recommendation of A/B split testing is to make very subtle minor changes, test it for a few weeks, like 4 weeks, and see, okay, was there any change simply by moving a word over here, or capitalizing a word, or putting an extra X or a hyphen, or anything, small changes like that. The extreme example on this, which I would think that would negatively affect your ranking, would be if you sell a garlic press, right? Shout out back to, I forget who was that had originally coined the whole garlic press example. Somebody in the audience knows that. I apologize. I wanted to shout you out, but I totally forgot. If you're selling a garlic press and you have that in your title and you split test it with shoehorn, guess what? Your ranking's probably going to be affected, because because 50% of your title is going to be incorrect. So in that case, yes, you would absolutely see the impact. But the more minor the change is in the test, the less likely you'll even notice a difference, if not positive, if you're trying to work toward positive increase in sessions and conversion rate. Now,
I was just going to say, I would love to see, I can't say one way or the other because I haven't run these experiments yet, but I would love to see if there appears to be a difference in any way in kind of what we can tell right off the bat from indexing or relevance when starting like day one of a new listing, running title experiments. Because like everything in me wants to say that there is going to be a difference in the way it reacts in the first week as opposed to the first month.
Well, yeah, I can see what you're saying on that, is that what happens when it runs. I don't actually know the answer to that question, because I've never run experiments in the first week during the honeymoon. I've always like this is what I'm putting in here. I'm going to stick with it. I'm like try not to interrupt it. Right. That's actually a really good question, but I would expect that there would be a bigger impact on ranking if I'm using an off Amazon, an external split tester. It's
possible, but that's only
some of these other tools aren't even around anymore. But
that's only if these experiments is properly, I guess, integrated with their relevance engine. Which, I mean, Amazon's so big. There's
you don't know. You would hope, but you don't know.
Gaps, and you're just like, man, why is that there? It's because like it's a behemoth.
Yeah.
So
But honestly, my opinion is that if you keep it subtle and you're doing best practice when it comes to a split test, you shouldn't really notice any impact on that.
okay.
Now, if you take
So
your number one converting keyword that's in the front of your title and you replace it with a completely different keyword phrase, yeah, probably.
I
You'll
mean,
probably notice.
I'd be curious to see what you would see though, even if you just dramatically change the order. Like let's say you have a phrase, right, that's intact, and then you take the second word and put it as the fifth word, and then the last word and put it as the last word. Like
Right.
how much would that change? Because you're literally separating that phrase by a pretty big amount. And I think it really depends on how old the listing is. Because in my experience, like disparate phrases eventually do make their way to being relevant for that listing, but it can take time sometimes because longer tail keywords get less traffic and less conversions, right? Because they're less trafficked. So anyway, we could geek on that forever, I think. We have a handful more for launches that are typical metrics that we should track to see if product is performing well against the market, etc. Click-through rate, conversion, ACoS. What ballpark benchmark should we measure against?
I always look at um, like the big two would be sessions and conversion rate. Like now, I also look at the other key metrics as far as when I'm running ads, as far as what the conversion rate is, what the click-through rate is. Click-through rate, first of all, conversion rate is definitely going to help you measure as far as what you're specifically doing, which products are performing above average in your multiple products, let's say, which ad types, which ad targets, whether that's products or keywords, are performing above average. In other words, you kind of want to figure out, okay, what's everything doing on average that I'm doing in my advertising, for instance. Now, what is performing below average? What's performing above average? Lean into the above average. Always lean into the above average. Because that is going to, it's kind of like the A/B split testing is that, okay, I tried two things or I tried three things and I'm going to keep the top two and I'm going to get rid of the one that's the lowest, right? It's what we would normally call, it's like, well, isn't that just standard PPC optimization? Yes. But I see so many times where people don't take that out. They look at individual things like a search term or a keyword and then they're done. Like, okay, I optimized. I'm like, no, you didn't. You optimized specific targets, but then you didn't go back in and you didn't look at your product targeting ASINs. You didn't look at the ad types that you're running, whether that's a sponsored product, sponsored brand video, or a sponsored product automatic campaign. And you're not looking at your own products. Let's say you've got multiple products. You're not going back and looking to say, should I be running ads on my lowest performing, lowest converting product because it's got a single digit conversion rate on it, so my profitability sucks on it. That's one of the reasons why I also introduce, when I'm looking at the products and which ones are performing above or below, is a lot of times when we've been doing this for a while, we've got a few products, we'll end up what we call a hero product. It's usually what we consider to be our top selling product that we focus most of our attention on unfairly. In other words, what I mean by that is oftentimes we have a secondary product that has a higher conversion rate, but we're not putting our ad dollars, we're not putting our effort into improving the secondary one and the tertiary, the third, fourth one that may have higher conversion rate, but they don't really show very many sales because the sessions are very low, which means you need to focus on, I've got this really high converting product, but it doesn't produce any sales. Well, get more eyeballs on it. Run your own traffic from off Amazon. It doesn't have to be all Amazon PPC. Most of you know me for Amazon PPC, but I'm telling you, like right now it's expensive because a lot of sellers put in stupid money and bid really high because they panicked because the traffic went down on Amazon since March when the COVID rules changed. And they think that they're all alone and they don't realize it's the entire platform that is down in sales and conversion rates. And they're just throwing money blindly at it when we've been harping at them for the last 6 months to say, it's like, no, You need to look beyond that. You need to look at your list. You go review your listing optimization. Focus your ads on what has an above average conversion rate. Drive more external traffic and traffic and no more traffic, right? To your products that have a higher conversion rate but may have low sessions. So those are some of the key things that I would recommend when I'm looking at key metrics is sessions, conversion rate, click-through rate. Click-through rate is more about ad relevance. The ads that I'm showing, do people click through on it? Therefore, they think it's relevant to their search. That's what that basically means. But conversion rate first, sessions second.
So to kind of piggyback on that, coming back to the core of that question with regard to a benchmark to compare against, the best benchmark to compare against is going to be yourself and your past performance.
Yeah.
Because you can't know those numbers for your competitors, and you shouldn't worry about what industry averages are. They're all over the place for every category. And as a business owner, literally the only actual metric that makes any kind of difference to you is your profit. So you're looking like sales is ultimately the one that you're looking at. So you just compare yourself to your past self to make sure that you're making an improvement, and then make sure that that improvement is leading to more sales. Otherwise, you have a much deeper problem than knowing, whether or not your conversion rate is better than your competitors.
Right.
You have a business related problem at that point.
I will also add to something that most people forget to look at too is as far as a benchmark goes, your business report organic conversion rate, if you will. That's kind of arguable because it's either organic or it's overall. We're not exactly sure. Neither is Amazon, apparently.
Yep.
That conversion rate that you see there, that units divided by sessions, should have a similar percentage for your ad campaign, which is orders divided by clicks. If you've got a huge gap between the two, one or the other has got a problem.
There you go. All right. So the next question we have here. So as you said, demonstration video more impactful for listings rather than just a simple video of the product. Absolutely. Like this is tried and true in
yeah, and I would say this is something that I commonly recommend. It's like look, if don't do an unpacking video. Nobody cares about the box and the shipping container it came in, right? What they want to know is when you actually have somebody showing the product and it's in their hand, now they've got a perspective. Oh, this thing's actually as big as that person's hand. Now I know how big it is. Because most sellers forget to even put in kind of size perspective. They say, oh, I've got this product and it sits nicely on your desk and everything. And you say, well, the pictures make it look like it's 3 feet across when it turns out it's 8 inches. It's like, so simply just having somebody a short video that says like, oh, okay, here's the product, basically. They see the size of it. It's like, okay, here's how I set it up. I do this. Okay, and this is how I turn it on. Great. You just saved me reading through and figuring out like, okay, do I need to learn this? What you just communicated to them is like, look, it took 4 seconds for you to start using this product because I just showed you how to assemble it and turn it on and it's ready to go. And people immediately look at that and it's like, wow, that looks easy.
It's
you
all
just brought down
about
a barrier of doubt they have in that video just by saying like, here's how big it is, here's how quickly it was to start using. Done.
It's all about framing, right? So when you frame so many different things, you show them the size, it's a perspective thing. You show the product in use, it's the perspective of ease of use thing. You show it compared to a similar product. That's another frame of reference that you're providing, and essentially it's all perspective. The prospective buyers looking at that, now they have all the data they need. They know, all right, this is where it would fit in my house. This is how easy it would be to use. This is how much better it is than others. Like the more of that you can add, the more you're answering all the questions. You're ticking all the boxes, and the only thing that's left is for them to make a decision based on like price and reviews, whether or not they want to choose you over a competitor. But all the other answers are given. So yeah, absolutely try to add as much of that as possible into a video. All right, the next question was, what do you recommend when Amazon changes the subcategory you are in? Stay there and change it and come back where you were before? I mean, I think it really all depends on what subcategory you belong in. If you have one of those products that can fit easily in one or the other, then like if Amazon moved you and you're actually like getting more again, sales, that's the thing you're most concerned about. if you're getting more sales, or you can get more sales, if your ads start actually working better, for example, then they made a good call and they moved you. If you ended up getting moved in a completely irrelevant category, obviously you have to get that fixed, right? If you like get adult flag for no reason, you have an adult product, for example, that's obvious. So ultimately it depends. You want to end up where you belong, where you fit in. Get in where you fit in. Where you fit in is going to be where your ad costs are the lowest, where your conversions are the highest, wherever that is.
There's a reason that Amazon moved you to the other subcategory. Try to figure out what that is. Don't simply just waste your time spending the next 6 months trying to have a conversation that goes nowhere with Amazon. That includes things like the adult flag. We've had one of my own products, as well as I've had 2 client products that have gotten adult flag or some kind of a flag like that, and seller support has been unable to do anything about it. And as soon as we brought in an outside IP attorney in order to discuss it with Amazon, it was solved within 24 hours every time. Now, that's $1,000 out of pocket probably for an attorney. And it may be as simple as a demand letter that goes to the right person. But the trick, I guess, is knowing who to send that to.
Yeah, that's what they charge you for.
That's part of what you're paying for. It's like who do I actually send this to get this resolved?
Yeah, it's not the body of the letter. It's the knowing.
With one of my own products too, it irritated me that it was even flagged that way. But you have to work around the system. Those things are gonna happen. The other thing too is if Amazon moves you to a different subcategory, consider what is it about that subcategory that might contain search terms. Now, the hard way of doing this, because no tool exists out there, and I don't make a tool that I built a while back public, is if you've got a list of, like, say, your top 20 terms that you think are converting for your product, take each one of those, search on Amazon, and look at which subcategories came up on the left-hand side and in which order, which sequence. That's going to tell you most relevant number 1, most relevant number 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, right? You're going to start seeing a pattern where maybe your advertising search terms are converting really well on the category, the subcategory that you were converting on. But then you also have to consider is what you're blind to is the other half of your keywords that you're converting on may be unrelated to what you're targeting in your advertising. In other words, that other subcategory may have a completely different audience that's using different terminology, and they like your product and they're buying your product organically, and Amazon is not telling you what those keywords are, or that you even have this alternative audience. And unfortunately, you've got to do the forensics yourself to figure it out so that you can then start testing your advertising in order to line up with that, because maybe your overall sales drop because your advertising sales disappeared. So try to figure out if you got moved, did something increase? Did your sessions increase? Did your impressions drop? Was it the impressions on ads that were for a set of keywords that may not be relevant to that subcategory that you got assigned to? And work to figure out what the reason is. It's not uncommon for a product to have 2 different audiences, and you may not even be aware of the second one.
Awesome answer. All right. With the current restock limits, where did it go? With the current restock limits, how would going FBM stand against Prime listings?
I mean, FBA Prime is always my first choice.
Yeah. So I actually have a client whose account I run, and we decided to go all in FBM because they're overseas. They're my friends of mine in Taiwan. And when they send inventory, they have to send a lot of it. And I remember we had like 1,000 units inbound, and literally while it was on the ocean, Amazon imposed this limit. And at that moment, I was just like, we're not going to use FBA anymore. So we went all in FBM. It did impact our ranking. Again, Amazon, remember we talked about it earlier in the workshop. One of the factors, the foundation of Amazon's, the way Amazon determines and shuffles relevance is availability. And they can ensure that a Prime product is available within 2 days, which is going to be a better buyer experience than they can somebody who is controlling their own shipping. until you have built up a reputation with Amazon. So Amazon knows that you are totally on point. You never had a problem with your shipping, et cetera. And then some of that kind of alleviates because there are big sellers that are FBM, but that takes time. And for the most part, it will be better if you're FBA. So my suggestion always is, I think you absolutely should have a third-party warehousing distribution
Option.
kind of
Yeah.
option where you send all of your inventory, because it's not realistic to like order from overseas suppliers like 200 units at a time. Send all your inventory there and then send it from there to FBA as needed, right? So it's more like your permanent staging warehouse. And every time you need to replenish 100 units to FBA, that's honestly, I think that's the best way to handle it. I have clients that we handle it that way too, and that's a very, very efficient way to do it.
I had I had like a short container that was so one of the conversations you actually should have as far as any kind of sourcing this year is definitely finding out from the from your logistics support, from freight forwarders, for instance, how creative they are, which ports they're sending to. Some of the ports like in San Diego, Los Angeles are really gotten pretty bad, as far as backed up, as far as California in general. For that reason, I had one of my containers actually shipped directly up to Seattle. And I actually have a friend of mine who's got a third-party warehouse up in the Pacific Northwest. So if you're up in that area, if you're shipping containers to Seattle, you can probably hit me up and I can give you their contact information to see if that fits for you. It may or may not, I don't know. But yeah, I would definitely have some kind of a backup option, because when logistics get pinched, especially when it comes to check-in at Amazon warehouses, one of the reasons that there's some legal issues that Amazon warehousing is running into, because they're storing so many of their trucks basically in the parking lots around Amazon warehouses because they can't check it in fast enough. And so that's one of the reasons why some warehousing you can get in your stuff within a week, and others it'll take you a month and a half. I had one of my products, it literally took 6 weeks to get checked in once it was already received by FBA. And so, yeah, I would definitely, in that situation, I wish for that particular product that I had my own third-party fulfillment by a merchant facility as a backup, because I didn't have an FBA option in that case. So FBA is probably going to be better when it comes to things like ranking and visibility, buy box, that kind of stuff. But I would definitely recommend having a SKU that is an FBM option, so that if you need it, you've got some kind of stock ready to go.
All right, here's an interesting one. I like this one. Will the data of A/B testing on your hero image be affected if you also change your price, or is the A/B test simply checking your buyer response to the image? No, Amazon definitely does not. Like, Amazon does use heat maps, but the split testing engine is not connected to that. They're not looking at where the mouse hovers with regard to response to the main image.
Right.
They're looking at any activity on the page. Did it convert? Did it add to cart? And that is going to be impacted by the price. So you should not be testing multiple variables at the same time, because you won't know, did they, when they clicked, was it the image, or was it, because the price is different now than it was, yesterday. So absolutely, one at a time.
Yeah, and technically, because AB is it basically alternates, every other shopper gets a different test. Then you adjusting the price is going to affect both experiments, not just one or the other.
Yep.
So yeah, it'd be cool if they get to the point where you can introduce
multivariate testing on Amazon. Absolutely.
Testing. Yeah, exactly. Like real A/B testing. Yes.
Yeah, that would be super dope. Man, I wish that was I wish every platform just had that innately and easy, right? Like, anyway. In terms of Amazon titles, Amazon loves short or long titles. Which item will show in search result early? Man, that is a heavy question. Let me take my glasses off for this one. Here's the thing. Style Guide absolutely always advocates for a shorter title, but that's because Amazon wants the aesthetics of their catalog to look a certain way. That's the reason why they went to truncating everything anyway. Point is with regard to how this impacts rank or relevance or whatever, that part of it is primarily going to be determined on buyer behavior. The more keywords you have in your title, the more keywords you're going to immediately index for, because the title's like an H1 tag and absolutely, will get read first and weighted higher than the rest of the listing. The more phrases that are intact, especially in a new listing, the faster you're going to gain relevance for those phrases. So there's a lot of reasons why all of the space in the title can be beneficial. The problem is your buyer is also reading these titles. And if you look spammy, then that's going to impact your click-through. And your click-through is a factor in all of this. For if you don't get the click in the first place, then you can't get all the other conversions that are impacting relevance because the buyer never made it to your listing in the first place. And that is going to have way more of an impact than, how the spiders crawl and determine like what your listing is indexed for. So you have to keep that in mind. This is why there's an art and a science to this. And the art part is how do you show up in the eyes of your buyer?
Right. Mobile versus desktop. And I usually when I'm teaching as far as like, advanced listing optimization, which is not your standard keyword SEO, advanced listing optimization. You'll hear me talk a lot about the first 75 to 80 characters that shows up on mobile. It doesn't mean you limit your title to 75, 80 characters. It just means you need to have your hooks into the shopper in that first 75 to 80 characters. I want to kind of like call an end to additional questions here. We've got about 5 more questions, and I don't want us to carry on too late. And so I'm gonna cut it off. And so if you've got follow-up questions, feel free to send those to us directly, or when the replay goes live up on the YouTube channel next week, then you can add them on to the comments as well. But I would say let's go ahead and finish up these last 5, and then we'll call it a day. And glad to have so much participation today.
All right. Does a lightning deal create a halo effect on our PPC? Great question, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, any kind of organic sales generally has a positive impact. So, lightning deals would increase, sales velocity for a product. It may not affect a specific keyword, but it would affect the product overall, which would give it a little bit of a bump. Unfortunately, Amazon doesn't give us any tools to measure that connection. And so halo effect, I think, is the correct terminology, is that, yeah, arguably, yes, it does, but who can prove it? So, but in my observation is that any of the organic, any kind of bumps to organic also creates a secondary bump to PPC and vice versa.
All right, this question's kind of highly technical. I can't answer it. This is definitely for you though, because it says, "Hi, Brian. Like you mentioned, do we have a gap in conversion between the business report and our PPC? The gap is quite big, and that the business report is double that of PPC. No subscribe and save. How do you interpret that, and how do we figure out the true conversion rate?"
Yeah, for unoptimized ad campaigns, it's pretty common for the ad conversion rate to be half of what your business report conversion rate would be. Primarily, this has to do with just refining your targeting, getting really good as far as like focusing your ads on what has the higher conversion rate. Focusing your ads on the higher converting products and targets and ad types is going to not only improve the profitability, therefore you can be more aggressive in your advertising, but it also, of course, raises your, obviously it raises your average conversion rate on your advertising. It's not uncommon for us to achieve basically on par. Your advertising conversion rate and your organic conversion rate should be essentially, if you're targeting correctly, then they should be lined up. One of the things to kind of take a look at is not just First thing, of course, is conversion rate of everything in your ads, your ad types, your ad targets. And then second would be go through and then review your click-through rates. So your click-through rates, if you've got very low click-through rates on certain ad types or certain campaigns, certain targets, then that's usually an indicator that you're missing your audience. In other words, you're not quite getting the hook, the relevance to those shoppers, and maybe there's something off in how you're targeting that particular audience, because they're being shown to an audience that doesn't think that your ads are directly relevant to what they're looking for. That's a problem that you can fix.
Right on. All right, now this is actually a really interesting question. When it comes to ranking a product on a specific keyword, we have the feeling that sales from a sponsored brand ad don't boost your organic ranking as much as sales of good old sponsored product ads. Could there be truth to this?
Sure.
I think that's a really fascinating question. I would love to
Yeah,
know. I don't
absolutely.
play around with these ad types as much as you do.
Well, it's because a brand ad is going to be on the brand and the product. It's not going to be on a specific keyword. You may be advertising your brand ad through a specific keyword, but the conversion may not, really. It may actually show up in the ad reports, but it may not directly affect, the overall algorithm. May look at it and say, this was really a conversion on your brand. That's kind of where we were talking about the halo effect, of either related keywords or non-specific or what's the word I'm looking for here? Attributed to a specific keyword that you may be trying to rank for. In other words, you're going to get some bump, and it depends on how the targeting is set up in any ad type, right? Sponsored display ads, when those are converting, they actually will help your organic sales also in your ranking also. But there's no tracking to go back and say, oh, it's on this specific keyword. So sometimes we don't even know what keyword that it actually helped. And so it can be kind of a hit and miss as far as being able to. It's not that it doesn't. It's hard to see. And so I would say yes, it does. I know there's a lot of discussions, and I would say valid. I'm not knocking anybody for being critical about, does advertising affect organic ranking. There's been a lot of theories thrown around there. My experience in our testing has been that yes, there is definitely a correlation between running ads and organic ranking. It is just far more difficult to measure, because Amazon doesn't give us all the data that we need.
Yeah, I would say that I believe that I have seen data that strongly points to a correlation between PPC and organic ranking, like literally charts that show ad costs and clicks and PPC performance going up in direct correlation, chart after chart after chart with keyword ranks. So the last part of his question was, how much, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this, how much ranking power do organic sales hold versus PPC sales?
I would say that they're probably similar. The challenge on this, I think, is that we as humans, we like the drama, so we want to hear that it's like, oh, advertising is dead, right? Or organic sales is dead, or some method is dead, or some method is all of a sudden works now. When in reality, is because Amazon's constantly changing the algorithm, it probably goes more in waves. As opposed to it's either on or off. And so what you'll see is that certain times of the year it'll work better than others, and you've got no rhyme or reason because you don't really have the data to look at it. My observation certainly is that the one I love is like, oh, I turned off all my advertising and my sales didn't go down. It's like, okay, what happens? What happened 2 weeks later? Oh, I haven't gotten that far yet. Okay, tell me what happens in 2 weeks. when the average metrics start catching up and start recognizing it's like, oh, you're not actually trying to go after these things, and then tell me what happens. Because usually it usually snaps at some point. But it really kind of depends on how much are you currently converting on specific keywords, How much does your competition put up resistance so that you can't move up or down? Is somebody like right on your tail, or are they far away as far as, do they need to sell 3 times as many units per day in order to catch up to you? Or are they one sale a day from taking over your organic keyword spot? And that can vary on every single keyword you've got. So the observation, because of the volume of ad spend and sales that we do through the agency, is we've got a much bigger picture, and we have definitely seen where we definitely can focus the ads in to be more specific, to focus more on the higher converting products, ad types, and ad targets, if I hadn't said that 10 times before already. But definitely, if we simply just turn it off, then we will definitely see a change where there's a penalty to it.
So my opinion with regard to which one, if there's one that's more powerful, I agree that they're similar. One thing I want to point out is one of these like stupid obvious things that I want to point out. The reason why it's really hard for people to see that PPC, impacts rank at a similar rate as organic sales, is that PPC, like, ads get clicked less than organic results. So it's hard to compare the two directly, because chances are your listing or the listings on an organic page, the organic listings are getting clicked more. People can actually read that this is sponsored. A lot of times that impacts it. Like, people don't want to for whatever reason. And it's just the organic stuff is usually optimally placed. So that does make it more difficult. But apples to apples, if you get the same impressions and clicks on and sales on a sponsored product versus an organic, like, you're probably going to see really similar results with regard to where it leads the ranking.
Sure.
And then,
I like Ben Lee's comments over in chat. He says he called it the doom switch in 2 weeks when you turn off the advertising.
So our last Q&A question here: when out of stock of FBA, is there a ranking impact in changing the listing from FBM versus making an FBM SKU? That's actually a really interesting question. I don't think I've ever
question. I haven't studied that. As far as the timing of when you switch over to FBM, as in, do you create the FBM only when you run out of stock, or do you already have it in the background waiting, and you just turn on the FBM? I usually try to say, if I have the FBM option, I'm going to have that as a separate SKU ready to go at a higher price point. And then I might change the price on it so that it matches what the other one is.
I can tell you from firsthand experience, because I have been in a situation where I wasn't necessarily testing for this, but this is what happened. We moved FBA listings over to FBM. Don't do it that way. Let me tell you why. This is it's not related to ranking. It's just one of those little things that you don't know about until you try it. If you move a listing from FBA over to FBM and then you get a return, that listing, the returned item is going to stay in stranded inventory. If you are connecting with a third-party service that is fulfilling your FBM orders, that can throw off their system. They'll turn around and they'll read it as like zero inventory. Something will get screwed up. Don't put yourself in that situation. It's easier for all parties involved if you have separate delineations between what this is and what that is. Just create a new SKU for your FBM. I promise it's going to work out better.
Awesome.
Moving over to the chat, we actually only had one. There was a chat question. We only have one though. Okay. Any tips or comments on using or not using the new targeting and budgets tabs in the Seller Central dashboard?
Ken, I'd have to probably ask for a little bit more detail on that, because there's a few different things that come up. Like the budgets, for instance, most of that, what we're seeing is the reporting. I think I get better value out of some of the other new features that are coming out in advertising specifically. You were mentioning Seller Central dashboard. So is that related to the brand, or are you talking about advertising specifically? I would think targeting and budgets would be advertising, but
it sounds like it. Yeah.
Okay, you are saying Amazon advertising. Yeah, and so then it's a case of You're talking about the new tabs that are within. They're talking about because they've added on things as far as like CPM for display ads. They've talked about as far as like budget ratio used. Usually those are going to come, things like budget controls and budget reporting is going to have a much bigger impact on some of the hot days like Prime Day, Cyber Monday, Black Friday, some of these, where you're just trying to figure out, okay, am I, is my budget allocated correctly to where, again, what I think has the highest conversion rate on the products. As far as the targeting, depending on which ad type you're focusing on, the targeting, you've got sponsored brand and sponsored display, new features regarding targeting. Some of those are for retargeting for sponsored display, for instance. They're expanding that a bit. There's also category targeting where you've got segmented targeting within categories. That's brand new. That's not even available in every account yet. And so, yeah, maybe hit me up directly on that one, Ken, on Facebook or wherever. And if you've got a more specific example or a screen that you're looking at, I could probably give you some better feedback on that one.
Right on.
Yeah, we everything that comes out, we have a whole R&D team on our agency staff that goes in and tests it. And we have three good sized ad teams within the agency that implement and constantly test that across a lot of accounts. So,
all right.
Cool.
That is all the questions. That was a really fun conversation. I love the fact that we had like an hour worth of presentation and then just under an hour worth of actual questions.
Right. I like the fact we had so many questions.
That's great.
I would ask those of you who are live on the call with us right now, and those who are catching the replay and have the ability to comment on the video, do us a favor, kind of give us some feedback here. Scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being you got so much value out of this, you got a huge amount of value on it. Give us some feedback here in the chat or in the comments that says, on a scale of 1 to 5, how'd we do today? That way it's going to kind of frame as far as what kind of content we put out in the future, where this is, if we don't ask, we don't know, and we're always trying to create, give you an edge. We want our audience to be the industry leaders as we've got all these, the t-shirts, the category kings and queens t-shirts. And so that's what we like to make. So. Awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you very much for the feedback.
Definitely.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. Awesome.
All right.
Anthony, a pleasure as always. I look forward to our next one. I know we've got a full schedule of workshops coming up. What is it? Every 2 weeks we're doing?
Roughly, twice a month. So rather than like stick it to an actual 2-week schedule, it's, mid-month, end of month, every month.
Right. Obviously, I've got the one of the other things that I'm doing on the off weeks is I'm also doing my recordings for Under the Canopy podcast. So we've been adding on videos for that. All of these will eventually show up. Maybe there's a week or two delay, but they'll eventually show up on my YouTube channel if you want to jump out there and subscribe and save. No, sorry. Like and subscribe and comment and, flip me off. Do whatever you need to do in order to just, show up. And obviously, if you want to have a conversation, canopymanagement.com is our agency. We are glad to help, especially going into fourth quarter when most brands need the most help. So, especially this year.
Well, awesome. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Brian, for having that conversation with me, and we'll see you guys next time.
Pleasure. Take care, everybody.